Right.
Can we start?
Yep.
Well, I traversed the route from Washington to Dulles Airport and was simply astonished at the residential growth. I mean, there are miles of McMansions, and this is, it was alluded to in a front page story in the New York Times a day or two after I got home. This represents the contract money from the Pentagon played out in this this enormous development. Talking about miles and miles of huge houses. And, well, I'm getting carried away, but you remember when Eisenhower was about ready to leave office, he gave this famous speech about military-industrial complex. The guy who wrote that speech later became president of the University of Minnesota, incidentally, and that's the military-industrial complex. And I think that the peace testimony, which used to be relatively individual and simple, did you uphold the peace testimony and either in one way or another oppose the militarism, conscientious objection, or something of that kind? Now I think our peace testimony has to be much more complex and deliberative, because now it's not just a matter of will you bear arms, an individual kind of thing. The whole darn society is involved in this. I remember there was a Norse folk myth about Utgar Loki playing a trick on Thor. He challenged Thor to lift a cat, but it developed that the cat was the transformed head of a serpent that went down and around the world, so as Thor is trying to lift the world, you know. Well, I think our peace testimony is too simple. Would you mind answering that?
Sure. Dick Magraw's phone. I'm not Dick, but hold on. I'll give the phone over to Dick. He's in a different chair. Hold on. There you go.
Hello?
Hi, Dick. How are you? It's Lane Burkhardt.
Hello, how are you? But if you asked about particular testimonies, I think the peace testimony is a central part of Quakerism. There are many other important testimonies, but right now I'm preoccupied with this because I don't think our peace testimony has carried the day in any sense of the word. I think we have an entire society that's been militarized, and it's sort of like Utgar Loki and Thor. We're trying to pick up the whole thing. It's not just a matter of individual pledging not to go to war, not to inflict damage on others.
Well, I'm interested about what you said about the prevalence of pacifism after World War I and how that contrasts with society today.
Yeah, gee, I'm afraid I'm not giving you what you want, but anyway, Tom White has this yellow card. You've seen it. And it's interesting. Tom comes into the meeting, from another religious background, and those of us who've been sort of stuck in the meeting are really caught up, found wanting, because we have not really said what Tom is saying very clearly, that this is a militaristic society that we're in. I mean, some have sought to avoid paying taxes, and I really think we need to rethink our approach.
Well, let me follow up on that. What would rethinking our approach be like, and how would you envision that happening?
Well, I think first of all we need to recognize the prevalence, the pervasiveness of the military-industrial complex. And I think that all our lives, Shirley and I fought support for the American Friends Service Committee and its service orientation was the right way to go. But now I'm thinking that Friends Committee on National Legislation is probably where we ought to be putting our major efforts. I don't know. I just think we have to really look at how pervasively the military-industrial complex is in our society. I don't think. I think I'm an old man. I'm getting beyond any effectiveness in these things, but I think that we have to take a much more radical view of what needs to be done. I'm not sure this is giving you what you want.
Yes, this is what I want. What you have to give is what I want, really. So
I think I honestly think that we probably need to be much more radical, much more aiming for the roots. I think Tom White is closer to what needs to be done and emblazoned. And that is not something I feel really very comfortable or enthusiastic about. My older brother who went to prison as a conscientious objector, in a way, never really recovered. He would dispute this, I'm sure, but from my perspective, his life never really got back on track. He had been Harold Stossen's director of administration. I forget exactly what his title was, and he never had his civil rights restored. He never could vote. So what I'm saying is I really shy away from radical approaches. I'd like to fade into the body politic and be
But you think that's what's needed?
Well, I'm certainly aware of the fact that our Quaker peace testimony has not carried the day remotely. I think we've lost ground in this regard. I'm going to talk about this at meeting, actually.
Oh, good, good. Well, maybe we could touch on some of the other testimonies.
You'll have to help me because I'm kind of drawing a blank. I should go get a book.
Well, there's the testimony of simplicity, for example.
Yes, I think that's an easy one to live. At least as I see it, I think to be radically involved in simplicity, I think is, in a way, I think it becomes kind of an end in itself, but to live basically a simple, unpretentious, undemanding life is the right way to go. But if it comes down to matters of dress, I think that's off-putting to me. I think it's, if you're going to adopt a buttonless existence, I think that's there are other more important things to do. Okay, simplicity. What else?
Integrity.
I think that's essential to, that's fundamental to everything else.
Well, let's switch gears a little bit then. I know one question that a lot of people have is, are Quakers Christian? And what's the relationship of Quakerism to Christianity?
Well, for me, Christianity is a religion. And my own view is that it's not essential that a Quaker profess how to say this. I think one can be a Buddhist. I think one can attend a Buddhist church or temple or a Hindu temple and still be a Quaker. I see Christianity as, for me, because of how I've been raised and the culture that I'm in, I have no trouble saying that for me, Quakerism is Christian. But I also think that you can come to Quakerism through other religious backgrounds. I see it as a. I'm be sort of put off by people who say, well, if you're not a Christian, you're nothing. There's no point in our talking if you're not a Christian. And there are a lot of people like that, and a lot of people in our meeting like that. But I'm trying to think of a good analogy for what I'm saying. maybe I can say it this way. I think that Christianity is a set of ethical and behavioral characters is a central part of Quakerism for me. But I think of Christian theology as not the same thing. I mean, concerns about the Trinity or the Nicene Creed or the Apostles' Creed, those things do not figure in my. I never think of reciting the Apostles' Creed, for instance, in Friends meeting. It's just not. I think it's a digression, not central to Quakerism as I see it. Gosh, guys, I'm uncomfortable about this because I may be offending you by what I'm saying.
Not me.
No?
No. Well, this sort of leads into another question I had. What, for you personally, is your concept of God?
Notice my body language. I move away from you. There are things about our world, our universe, that I don't understand, that are, as far as I'm concerned, beyond my understanding. And I'd be quite comfortable saying that that kind of fact, that kind of ambiguity, I'd be quite comfortable giving the name God to. But I am not really very comfortable with pushing into that unknown and building a theological structure of a Trinity or a heaven or a hell or purgatory or anything of that kind. I feel those are man-made constructs, and I have no quarrel with people who want to draw those kind of pictures and who fall down and worship them. I just don't want them to feel that I have to worship them. I'm putting him to sleep.
Well, let's talk then about Quaker meetings for worship. What happens in a meeting for worship?
Well, there are several salient elements of it. One is that it is congregational. It is a collective effort. People are gathered. It is basically a kind of expectancy. There's no format other than that expectancy. It has no, well, that's not quite true because we have these hymns and so forth, but there's really there's no real formality other than those elements of timing involved. I'm more comfortable with as between the early meeting, which is essentially totally unstructured, except for the obligatory reconstitution of the hour by having people fill in anything they wanted to. That is pretty obligatory. But I'm more comfortable with the somewhat structured, semi-programmed, as it's called, meeting, fundamentally because of tradition and history, that's what we have attended. That's where some of these wonderful people that I think of as being saints in my own experience, like Edith Jones or Matt Thompson, or Jack Parker, that are lots of others that I'm going to forego naming. I think that the lack of formal structure, the avoidance of rote expressions of regular formulated prayers, which from my perspective, I really don't think of as being prayers at all. I think they are recitations, like a Pledge of Allegiance. They're oftentimes beautifully phrased. I think of the Episcopal Book of Common Prayer. There's some wonderful phrases in that. We have done those things which we ought not to have done, and we have left undone those things which we ought to have done. Every Sunday that's expressed exactly. But in my view, it would be better not to have it so rote and not to have it in such a punctuated, thought-escaping, thought-avoiding way. And that, of course, is one of the characteristics of the silence of Quaker meetings, is that it does encourage thought. There was a book years ago, The Keys of the Kingdom, in which the priest characterizes prayer as nothing more than clear thinking. And I think that that's characteristic of the silence of Quaker meeting.
So I know you're someone who fairly frequently will stand during meeting and speak. How do you discern when it's time to stand and say something? And when you do, what's the experience like?
I find myself wanting to say, if I think there's something that ought to be said. And for instance, if somebody has spoken, has been the formal speaker, and there have been no responses to that person, I'm likely to cudgel my thoughts. It's something that can be said to respond or round that off. But and I'm afraid sometimes I'm guilty. You spoke about my quoting things, and it's perfectly true. I do tend to live in terms of all these sort of floating bits of thought or wisdom circling around it. I'm sure, maybe a third or a half of the time I'm motivated because it just seems to me that fits, rather than I'm acutely aware of the meeting as a congregation. And I suppose if you ask me, see, I don't think of my comments as God-driven or as divinely ordained. I think of it more of a human interaction.
Okay. So you've been attending Minneapolis Friends Meeting for
60-some years.
60.
We were gone, though, for a while.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway, a long time. And I know you're still coming as often as you can. I don't know, do you have a way of summarizing what it means in your life? What value you get out of attending the meeting?
Well, first and foremost, it's the matter of a collective effort to address the things going on in our lives in the world. There was a song in the Civil War. You maybe never heard it, called "Tenting Tonight on the Old Campground." Do you know that one? And there's a line, "Many are the hearts that are weary tonight, wishing for the war to cease. Many are the hearts looking for the right who want to see the dawn of peace." And I think that's sort of the set I bring in the meeting. Many are the hearts looking for the right. That's kind of what I bring in the meeting. That's the sort of set I bring to the meeting. And I think Shirley and I used to come all the time. We didn't in recent years because Shirley had some mental problems that made it difficult. But there were years, when we didn't miss, because it was a very important thing to be with others. And you asked me what we got out of it. There were always these people that, to me, were outstandingly good people. I started to name them, and I feel our lives were richer for that. There were a whole lot of them, really, and a whole lot of them.
You raised, I don't know how many kids you and Shirley had. So you raised 4 kids in the meeting, and what was that like? And how do you say?
You know, Sue Murray never fails to talk about how difficult it was to teach her son Rick, who would challenge things like Moses rolling back the Red Sea, or and she said she felt he was forcing the teachers to think about what they really believed. I laugh about that, 'cause what was that like? I think it left its mark on every one of the children, but they are not all Quakers. In many ways, the guy who's the most affected, Tom, is not at all a Quaker. He married the daughter of a United Church of Christ minister, and so they are members of the Church of Christ. But they always know what's going on with Quakers. The one that lives here, there's a dentist here in town in Mound, she never goes to meeting. Her husband's a fallen away Catholic. The oldest one is a daughter who's a doctor in Colorado, and she, when the woman who was head of the AFSC took office, she had Wendy, this daughter, come with her to Haiti. They traveled to Haiti as a first effort. So but you know, Grand Junction, Colorado is not a hotbed of Quakerism. So, and the other son is very much involved in the kinds of things that the Quakers are involved in, but he's not attending meeting. But he, again, knows all the things that are going on. And so we didn't do very well. Andersons didn't either. It's interesting. Linda Coffin is the exception, and Betsy White. See, the Whites, the Coffins, the Andersons, the McGraws, the Crockers, and there were plenty of others that kind of came and went. They were a flock of kids. That's sort of were the backbones of Sunday school.
Well, you say you didn't do very well, but that Quakerism left their mark on,
Oh, yes.
on all of them.
Oh,
I'm
yes.
sure they're all wonderful
Yeah.
people. So.
Well, I think so. But I haven't talked to Rusk and Arnie about that. We'll have to get together and talk to them about that. Or to Louise White. When you spoke about speaking in meeting and about the fact that I speak very often, I think about Louise White, who never speaks. Louise White is a very smart woman, and she's a birthright Quaker, you know. And she's somebody I would listen to if she spoke. Do you know Louise very well?
Not very well, no.
You know, she worked for many years as a salesperson in women's clothing at Dayton's. Interesting. Do you know her very well? She's very, very bright. So is Rusk. Farnells. I didn't mention the Farnells. See, Shirley and Ella Farnell were the ones that started the family camp. It was a big deal when it was started. See, the church was growing, but people were located all around the Twin Cities. There's no cohesion. And the family camp was a very important thing when it got going. Really gave sort of jet-propelled the takeoff of the meeting, and was centered around the Sunday school, the first day school. And you probably never knew Ella Farnell. Well, these were some of the saints that I speak of, yeah. And above all others, Matt Thompson. Oh, I wish he were around. He was an extraordinary person. He's from the deep South, had a irreplaceable Southern accent, you know. But he was just amazing in his capacity to pull together people of divergent views, you know. And there was for many years there was a class, an adult class held on the balcony at Monarch that Matt Thompson managed. His work, he was a YMCA secretary, and there was a very well-known guy. What the heck was his name? He's a television and radio personality. You'd know him. He moved to Matt moved to Dayton, Ohio, where this guy was located, and this guy wrote a couple wonderful poems about Matt, describing him as a saint, which was, of course, would drive Matt up the wall. But that's really was really. He was an amazing person. Well, I think we've won. Have we run the course?
Just about.
Okay.
Do you have any way of summarizing what finding Quakerism, what being a Quaker has meant to your life over these last 60-some years?
Well, it's hard not to be emotional about that. Certainly been a defining element. I think of all the extraordinary experiences that we've had in relation to that. You know, Shirley was kind of a I haven't got a good phrase. She was somebody that the American Friends Service Committee relied on for serving as a hostess for these various missions that they sent out to carry some message to the country at large. I should be able to think of some of these people. Septima Clark. Is that a name that means anything to you? Septima Clark was Septima Poinsett Clark. Her maiden name was Poinsett. Joseph Poinsett had a huge plantation in South Carolina, and he was he's the person for whom Poinsett is named. He was the ambassador to Mexico and discovered, quote, discovered for America the poinsettia plant. Joseph Poinsett, South Carolina, was ambassador, I think, about the time of the Civil War, right, just afterward, I guess. Septima Clark was Martin Luther King's director of education. She's a black woman educator, teacher. And she was one of these people that was sent out at the time of civil rights. And what Shirley would do would be, she'd have this person maybe staying with us for 2 weeks or so, and she'd have a series of suppers or evening meetings. I remember one of my particularly good friends at the U, Jim Carey, was at our house when Septima Clark was there. Jim was the smartest guy in the medical school, and my particular friend, and I talked to him the day after he was at our house. The dean of the medical school was there, and a bunch of other people, and he sort of shook his head and he said, "I feel sorry for that secretary, for that Sheriff Jim Clark." And that was, I'm getting carried away. That kind of thing was enormously beneficial to us and to our kids and to the whole outreach. Oh, and there were a whole lot of those people, and I can't even remember their names anymore. The guy who was president of Cummins Diesel came through. We were trying to forestall the Vietnam War, and that fell more to me than to Shirley, because I was supposed to get the presence of McAllister and Hamlin and St. Thomas, together to meet with this guy. He was a big wheel. I can't even think of his name. But anyway, that's the sort of thing. You asked me, what did being a Quaker mean? Well, that's kind of an easy thing to think about, but that's kind of a easy set of things. But, when we went to Japan, it was terribly important to us to be connected with a friends meeting. This is just one of those senior moments. Oh dear. I'm trying to think of a Quaker author. His wife was Shirley's particular buddy over there. Sorry.
It's all right.
I'm going to excuse myself and get a picture. Maybe that'll remind me.
Okay.